Good evening. I think that in the interest of all of your time, who took the time to come, we should get started. It's a small crowd, but you're here and you're interested, and we appreciate that. So welcome to our first Facilities Master Planning Forum. I'm Clay Gleason, the superintendent, for those of you who don't know. We are recording this too, so just be aware that if you get up and speak in the mic, your comments will be captured for posterity. What we're hoping actually is that the turnout here, the limited turnout, will be offset by people viewing online after. We find that, like with our board meetings, we don't always get a lot of live viewership, but a lot of people watch them after the fact. So it will be posted and available after the meeting. So again, welcome. Our purpose here tonight is to get community input as we embark on this process of deciding the future of our facilities, our buildings, our fields, our grounds. We're a big district, and Harriman Associates are here to guide us through this process, and they'll take over in a few minutes. But some of the slides they're showing you just capture the scope and the size of our district and the spread. And we have aging facilities, and we need to figure out what we're going to do. Because if one thing I don't know a lot of things, but I know that if we keep doing nothing, we're going to end up paying for it in the long run. So there's a lot of aspects to this. There's the classroom spaces, there's business and office spaces, there's all our fields and grounds, as I've already mentioned, whether that's our athletics programs and our ideas that people have around that, or our performing arts facilities and the things that we're lacking for our students and all of these activities. So I'm sure there will be plenty of opportunities for folks to offer their input as we go on. So I'd say anytime, definitely put your hand up or just come right up to the mic if you have a question or want to join the conversation. There is a sign-in sheet going around, so if you missed it, you're not required to sign in, but it would be awesome if you don't mind signing in so that we can have your contact information. So I think, without further ado, well, maybe I should just say in our audience, we do have a couple of our school board members. So we have Dawn Marianne, Erica Kreutz, Nathan Carlo, right? I didn't miss any other board members, right? And then a couple of our district employees, and then I'll give Tom Delaney some billing because he's a former board member, Budget Advisory Committee chair, and all-around contributor to pretty much all efforts in our district for the last few years. So anyway, thank you all for coming, and at this point I'll turn it over to Lisa from Harriman.
Good evening. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So, as Clay introduced us, we're Harriman. My name is Lisa. With me I have Emily and Jamie. We are an architecture and engineering firm. Those who are familiar with the Buxton School, that was a building that we worked with you all on in the past, and we're really excited to be here as part of this long-term vision for the future of the facilities and grounds here in MSAD 6. So tonight we're going to go over what is a facility master plan, what is the process, what is the schedule, what to expect through this process, and how you can get involved. Because we need this solution to be your solution. This is about the community, and this is a solution that works for your specific community. So your involvement is critical in this process. So the agenda for tonight is defining a facilities master plan, going over the goals that have been identified through the process already, overview of the process, the schedule, discussion, but as Clay said, at any time if people have comments or questions, do not hesitate. We really want this to be a dialogue tonight. And then next steps. So what is a facilities master plan? There's a lot of words up on this slide. But essentially, what we want to do is assess and analyze options to determine the most effective use of resources now and in the future. And so what we're doing as we go through this facility master plan is we're identifying the district goals. We are performing enrollment studies so we can understand where enrollment is going in the future. We're analyzing the space utilization. So what is the utilization of the existing spaces now? We are evaluating existing facilities. You guys have a report that's already been done on a lot of your facilities. We are building upon that as we collect all this other data and we will use all of that to start to formulate options. We'll assess current and future educational visioning and programming. So what's really important about a facility master plan is thinking about where we're going with education in the future. Because these buildings and grounds want to support that vision. So there's a lot of work that's being done right now in regards to the educational visioning and programming. And then long-term facility solutions that address the district goals and are the most effective use of the resources. So several steps, again, that culminate in the most effective use of your resources. So what are the goals? So the project goals, and these have been, there was initial goals that were set out by the district, and then through the educational visioning process, with how many folks are there? Probably about 33 to 40 folks. We got more specific in those goals. And so what you're seeing up here on the screen are a combination of both the overall initial goals and the more detailed goals. So I'll review these, and then as I'm reviewing them, I'm going to pose a question that I want you to think about as we go through this whole presentation. And at the end, we really want to hear from you in response to this question. I'll start with the question and then review the goals. So what steps do you think the district needs to take to achieve the project goals? And those project goals, again, determine the most effective use of resources now and in the future. You're going to hear that over and over again. Plans supported by community and backed by data. So what we're doing now is collecting all the data so then we can come forward with our analysis and options, but again, it's not successful unless it's backed by the community. We're going to explore all options. Nothing's off the table. We're going into this with an open mind. Solutions are going to be driven by the things that you see bulleted here. Enrollment projections, pedagogy, increased efficiency and equity with newer, fewer buildings and centralized locations. Schools and sites as resources for extracurricular events, such as athletics, the arts, etc., community, and BE Pride. We heard BE Pride over and over through the vision. It was great. Improved instruction and climate through differentiation, innovation, safety, and security. I know there's some dialogue out on Thought Exchange right now. We're seeing a lot around safety and security through some of that. Increased efficiency and equity with full-time staffing. Increased flexibility, educationally and spatially, to promote learning and collaboration. Align with state funding resources, or sources, I should say. There is a program through the state of Maine that you can get on their funding list. It comes out roughly every 5 years. It's anticipated that another one of these cycles is coming out in 2024. So a lot of this process is aligning with that application, so we can be looking at all options for funding, whether that be community funding, state funding. So all of these steps are really building towards an application for state funding as well. It will be released, we believe. We haven't seen it in writing yet, but we keep hearing in 2024 it's going to be released. But that means that you need to get on the list, and you need to rank high on that list in order to be an approved project. With the 2024 list, the first projects will come out roughly around 2026. To put it into context, the last application was in 2017, so 6 years ago. I think we are now on project number 5 on that list. So in that time, they've done 5 projects across the state off the 2017 list. So it's not a shoo-in that you'll get the funding, but if there is a need, and that's what we're going to identify through this process and really gear this information towards those applications, we want to make sure that we do all of our due diligence and go after any funding that is available. So again, as we're going through this, think about these goals. We want to make sure, are there other goals that maybe we've missed? And what steps do you think the district needs to take in order to achieve these goals? In some of the visioning, what you're seeing over here on this chart, as we started to do some of the educational visioning, we just took a quick poll of the leadership at that time as to how they would rank priorities. And so these aren't all of the priorities, but it just gives kind of a sampling as to where people's heads are at. 21st century educational best practices. For those who are not familiar with the changes that have happened in education, probably in the past 15 years or so, there's been a huge shift. A lot of schools were built at a time to where we were educating in what is referred to as a cells and bells building. And what that means is you go into a cell, a classroom, we're just talking about the box essentially. You learn a subject. Bell rings, you move to the next cell, you learn a different subject. Bell rings, you move to the next cell. Essentially, it was the factory mentality of creating factory workers. And that's not how we're preparing kids these days for education. There's so much cross-pollination between subjects. We no longer have these silos. It's about bringing everything together, whether it be through STEM or STEAM, project-based learning. We have to get kids ready for the 21st century skills they need in the workplace, and they're always changing. So we're always trying to figure out how do we create kids that are critical thinkers, that are creative, that can communicate, that touch all the 5 C's, and many other things. So that's the shift that we've seen, and it means the building needs to be more flexible. And we need to be able to really introduce education anytime, anywhere. It's no more just about that classroom. So we'll be talking about that through this process, and that's a lot of the stuff that we're talking about with the educational visioning, is we're talking about educational priorities, but we're also talking about architectural priorities that will align with that. Yeah. So I'll turn you over to the educators to talk about the 5 C's, because you guys are best at it. Critical thinking, communication, collaboration. What are the other 2? There's 2 others, but essentially what it is it's around this idea of design thinking. Creativity, thank you. And there's one other, character. So it's about developing those skills that aren't necessarily things we've focused on in the past specifically, but it allows students to really be ready for the future in education. And there's a couple different takes on those 5 C's. Some people drop character and add something else, but generally you get the idea. So what is needed for the state application? You can see the different parts up here. A lot of the stuff we've talked about that we're doing through this process is in these sections. So educational program information on affected facilities, facility information, comprehensive tenure enrollment analysis, which is part of this, facility maintenance and capital improvement plans, professional studies, facility studies and assessment, and then instructions, timeline, and facility location. So we're thinking about this as we're going through this process. So at the end of this, the intent is we figure out what is the application or applications that would be going to the state. So just for context, I think everybody knows where all your schools are, but it's just a nice kind of grounding image here to show you the different schools in the district from elementary, middle to high school. And these are just a quick dashboard of the facilities that we are visiting, both from a facility standpoint, but also a site standpoint and an educational standpoint. So we're looking at everything that supports the school from whether it be athletics, parking, circulation, everything that is on the site, to inside the building itself, building off of the system study that you've already done, and looking at programming, what programs you have, what programs might be missing spaces, what programs are needed in the future that you may not have the space for, what's working well, what isn't working well. And that's the data that we're collecting on all of these schools right now. So from the high school to the middle school, Hollis, and as we get into the elementaries, there's slightly different grade configurations, pre-K5, Buxton Center, pre-K5, Steep Falls, we have K3, and there's also different populations of students. So looking at all of that. At Libby, we have a pre-K3, HB Emory Junior Memorial School Pre-K 5, Georgia Jack 4-5. And so those are the schools that we're looking at, as well as looking at other facilities within the district, because we know that there are other existing resources that you have. We're also meeting with facilities and maintenance to understand what their needs are, as well as a whole slew of different directors and specialists within the district. I'll pause there to see if there are any questions before I move on to the overall process. All right, overall process. So this is the list of tasks that are included in what we are doing for the master plan. I'm not going to go in depth on every single one of them. I'm going to touch on like 2 or 3. I'm going to be very high level in some of them. You can see the list here. Enrollment study. We are partnering with an individual that does enrollment studies to project out 10 years what is predicted to be the enrollment in the district. We look at that grade level as well as school, so we get able to understand as we put these options together the number of students that those options can serve. Space utilization and capacity analysis. We've talked about. The ones in bold are the ones I'm going to dive pretty deep into. So educational visioning and program analysis we'll get into. Facility condition analysis, we're going to take the report you already did. We'll take our architects and engineers. As we start to think about options for these schools, we'll then walk the building. We'll look at the report that was done, make sure that we agree with the findings of it, and then identify if those structures can support renovations and or additions as we start to come up with options. Financial and energy use analysis. So we've been working on with the district to gather all of the financial and energy use for all of the buildings. This allows us to create a benchmark as to what the existing energy use is for those buildings. So as we start to put together options, we can compare the existing to the proposed options. Option evaluation, we'll give some examples of that. And all of this goes into a master plan that essentially has all the data, community feedback, and the options and the recommended option through this process to move forward with into the future for the district to support the goals. We'll also have a website that as we develop content will be up so that it's easy to access all this information. And then community engagement, incredibly important, and we'll talk about some additional times to which we'll have community engagement. And I just want to echo something that Clay said. We have found through this process, and in particular post-COVID, we don't get a lot of in-person attendance, but the amount of viewership that we have after events online, and as well as you guys have a great platform, Thought Exchange, to be able to connect with the community and get additional feedback. We find just being able to do in-person, online, and have information access in multiple ways is very successful. So, the educational visioning summary. So we did a couple educational visioning sessions so far. We've done 2, and we have another one coming up. So the summary is we had 33 school and district administrators representing everything from district, elementary, middle, and high school participate in this. Essentially, the group discussions explore what MSAD's 6 strategic goals, number 1, number 6, look like in action, identify the vision of engaging authentic learning at each grade level, and identify space types and features to support engaging authentic learning. So essentially what we did is we looked at your strategic plan, again, building off of what you've already done, and took a couple of those goals and really teased them out with this group to say, what does this look like in action? What does it look like to have engaged and authentic learning at each grade level? And then starting to think about what space would be required or would support that. So through this is where these goals that you saw earlier were teased out with this group. And you can see we had white post-it paper all over the room. We had each of the groups put ideas up on this post-it board, and then we took the ones that we saw over and over and over again, and we're able to create a distilled list of the goals that we heard coming out of this group. And I won't repeat these because they're the same as the previous slides. But you can see the ones that really rose to the top are this idea of newer, fewer buildings centralized, as well as schools and sites as resources for extracurricular events, community, and PE pride. So, in this session, strategic goal 1. For those that don't have it memorized, we put them up here for you. Help all students find success through high-impact instructional strategies, curriculum alignment, and varied educational opportunities. I know many of you were at these events that are in the audience, but essentially what came out of that is what does that look like? What is that? The 3 bullets that rose to the top are STEM curriculum for pre-K through 12. And for those that don't know what STEM is, if there's ever an acronym that I use that you don't know, just raise your hand, we'll define it for you. STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. Hands-on learning experiences and project-based learning. So strategic goal 6, create innovative learning opportunities for students to prepare them for an ever-changing world. That's what we were just talking about. We're really having to prepare students for almost the unknown. So what does that look like? Real-world applications, making sure what we're teaching the students have a real-world application. We've seen this in different districts, and even we've helped out with it in our company, to where we help them create projects that really apply to the real world, and then we can show them how what they're doing supports that. Interdisciplinary opportunities, new opportunities and pathways, flexibility of learning spaces and schedules to best support students' needs, educational pathways, and the things that we saw reoccurring over and over through this conversation: community, collaboration, technology, and flexibility. Strategic goal 2, better support the changing social, emotional, and educational needs of our students. So the outcome of this and what this looks like: curriculum that reflects 21st century skills, incorporate self-regulation strategies into the learning environment, and flexible educational environments to meet student needs. So we're seeing this at a lot of schools, to where every student approaches learning differently, and they come in with different skill sets. So being able to use the spaces to meet the students where they're at and where they're comfortable learning. So the biggest thing we see in schools these days are varied spaces and flexibility. And you can see that aligns with a lot of the stuff that you're seeing on the side here. Community exploration, with those last 2, flexibility, learning, or varying learning spaces. So after we did that, we went through a slide deck of different architectural best practices, or sometimes you'll hear us call them design patterns, that support these different things that we were talking about. So individuals were asked to rank numerous images that best support your vision of authentic, engaging learning. And I know it's probably pretty hard to read this, but you can see out of those what was rising to the top with the group that attended. I'll go over the top 4. I tickle my throat. The top one is secured entry. So again, this theme of safety and security. Breakout quiet spaces and embedded intervention. So that folks that don't know what that might mean, it means that you can be able to break out of the classroom, have a space for the students to go to, or a quiet space. Embedded intervention, so that we have a space right next to it to where staff can intervene with students. And I may have butchered that. Any of the educators, please chime in if I have. Third is welcoming arrival. I know it sounds simple, and it sounds like, of course we want to welcome arrival. It's so important. It sets the tone for the entire school. It makes students feel like they belong to that community, as well as the community belongs. And so we have to balance, obviously, safety and security. We think hunker down, close off, welcoming arrival. It's like, oh, here we are. So we have to balance those tensions, and there's a lot of strategies for us to be able to do that. Collaborative learning communities is number 4. And and it goes on from there. Sorry, I'm gonna take a sip of water. So what you're seeing on the screen are examples. So secure entry, looking at making sure that we have secure entry points. These breakout spaces and embedded intervention, what you're seeing is a classroom and a classroom, and then small group rooms that are shared between those. Yeah?
Can you elaborate a little bit on the secure entry? Would that expand off of just having locked doors in the front, and what would that look like?
So there's many layers to it. The secure entry is a couple things. One, we position the admin so they have a clear cone of vision to the site and what is coming to the front door. We also typically have a vestibule, and everybody approaches it differently. You guys have a vestibule and a door into admin. Some people have the door to admin after that second set of doors. It's really what aligns best with the policies and procedures. But in that vestibule, you want to have a way for people to be able to see who it is and determine, do they need to go any further in this building? And with the actual doors themselves, yes, they're locked. You're buzzed into that, but they're also hardened. And essentially what I mean by that is there's glass that we can specify that takes a certain amount of time to get through. And so with the secure entry, we're trying to buy time so that we can prevent somebody getting into the school while the emergency personnel is getting there.
I'm sorry to break it really dark, but for example, the last school shooting, they shot the door open.
Mm-hmm.
That hardening process alleviate that? Like,
It would take them, with the type of glass we're talking about, they could potentially still be able to shoot through the door, but they can't break the glass. As in, they can't damage it to get in. No, you're fine. It's a really tough subject to talk about, but it's real, right? And it's on everybody's mind. So the glass that we specify takes 6 to 12 minutes, depending on which one we specify, to get through. So they could be doing everything they want, hitting it, shooting at it. They're not going to be able to get through that barrier. It will take them 6 minutes, depending on which one we spec, or 12 minutes. And then a lot of times the wall between that vestibule and the administration is hardened as well. The idea is you don't want to see the hardening because then you feel like you're kind of in a jail cell. So we design it to where it's there, but we're still able to have the bright, welcoming entry. But that wall we can harden. There's actually systems, I won't use the proprietary name, but essentially it's a Kevlar layer that we put in the wall between the vestibule and the admin. You're welcome. Yeah? Yes, absolutely. So, panic button in the admin area, and anyone that doesn't know what the panic button does, when we design new schools, we have a lot more control as to how it can lock down the school to really allow different areas to be locked off to where people can't get further into the school. But the panic button also alerts the authorities silently, so they're there as quickly as possible. But yeah, all great questions. And there's many other layers. It's not just the secure entry. There's many layers to safety and security. That just happened to be one that was shown in this. Yeah?
So when it makes the police aware, does it also make the teachers inside the facility aware?
It depends on the system. If it's, some schools have it to where there's an app that alerts teachers, whether it be through their phone, smartphone, or in the classroom. It all depends on what you spec and what is desired by the district. So it could alert them. There's different ways we can go about it. A lot of times we'll do a zone PA system so that when it does go into lockdown, right next to it is a way to do either an all call to the whole school or be able to call certain sections of a school, because you may find that there's something happening on one side of the school where you need to shelter in place and you want to get everybody else out. And so you're able to do different calls that way. All great questions. The second image we're talking about is the breakout quiet spaces and embedded intervention. What's really nice about these is when you position them between the classrooms like that, whether an interventionist is coming in to work with a student one-on-one, now that student doesn't have to travel across the school, miss out on education time to go get those services. It's literally like peel off from the classroom. And when it's not being used for that, it can be a great small breakout space for group work. So there's a lot of advantages to that, and there's great visibility from the classroom. And then welcoming arrival, making sure there's a clear sense of arrival. This school down here actually designed a sensory garden that the students have to walk through to get to the front door. So to make it a very intentional arrival for the children to make that connection to nature. So the next, individuals are asked to rank numerous images that best support your vision for social emotional learning. And when we're talking about social emotional learning, we're talking about giving kids the skills, the social skills they need to thrive in the world. So in this, you can see that there's almost like a dead tie for first with 4 of them. Multifunctional student commons. And so student commons is a lot of times what people are calling the cafeteria area at this point. It's really a space owned by the students for the students to socialize. And when it's multifunctional, it means maybe you can do performances there or other things. Areas of respite, personalized dining social experiences. What we're finding is the cafeteria can be pretty overwhelming for a lot of kids. Some kids thrive in it. Other kids, it can destroy their day. Other kids can't handle the sensory triggers that it creates. So a lot of times we're designing cafeterias now that have a space adjacent to the cafeteria. They can still see everybody in the cafeteria, but it's smaller, more intimate, better acoustics. They can still be near the peers that maybe want to be in the larger cafeteria, but they feel more comfortable. We find a lot of times this is really important for special education students to be able to be with their peers, but maybe can't handle that setting. Outdoor connections. There's so many studies that talk about how important outdoor connections are. We've seen, and I think you guys have seen too, since the pandemic, huge push to learning outside. And so being able to create spaces that are safe and secure to be able to do that. So we see a lot of smaller courtyards being designed for students to really push outside and learn. As well as just visual connection. Being able to visually see outside has a huge impact on the learner. And then right behind that is calming and sensory features. And these are just a couple examples. So multifunctional student commons in the upper left corner. Essentially, it's showing different configurations of seating. It's also showing some performance spaces. It's kind of open to the circulation. There's many different ways that you can go about that. A lot of times we'll see in a student commons a stage with a proscenium, so there can also be a performance space. Areas of respite, these are essentially, again, creating various spaces to learn. The top image is a renovation of a school. If anyone's familiar with the Lycett Elementary in Portland, that's that school. Typically, CMU corridor doors on both sides. When we walked that school, we saw that the hallways were lined with desks and chairs because they're pulling students out to work with them. So we said, well, what if we're intentional about this and we make it fun? So just by creating these little nodes of color, we were able to do a desk area for the students to learn on their own or with an adult. That wood is actually an acoustic material, and then across from them is a pen-up space for them to celebrate their work. It also announces the entry to their classroom neighborhood. And the students, each classroom grade is a different color, so it's a wayfinding mechanism. And then the students and faculty came up with the graphic idea of doing local vegetation to Maine. And so each one of them has a different graphic. So just taking a traditional hallway and adding these different things to be more intentional with that breakout space in an existing building. Areas of respite down below. Another idea is just kind of carving out these different nooks. We see that kids, and I'll be honest, adults gravitate to these little areas to where we feel protected, but we can still see what's going on until we're maybe see somebody we know and we're comfortable moving into a more open setting. And then personalized dining and social experiences. So these are different approaches to providing personalized dining and social experiences. This is the cafeteria area is right behind here, so this is a breakout space on the other side, a little bit more intimate. This is the new Edward Little High School under construction with a learning stair. The students can sit on there, they can eat, they can socialize. There's a presentation wall right across, so it also becomes a lecture space. So it also doubles as a multifunctional student commons. So that was a high level of the visioning that's going on right now. A lot of great dialogue, a lot of fun, a lot of feedback from everybody, and really distilling out what that educational vision is. We're meeting with every principal at all the schools. This is just a sampling. We got a lot more feedback than just this from the principal. But just to give you a flavor as to what the conversations are that we're having with all the different principals, the data that we're collecting. And this is data that we wouldn't know if we just walked around the building. But to be able to hear from the principal and the staff in the school and understand what's working, what isn't working, where are the priorities, and hey, it'd be really nice if, those types of things. So all of this leads to options. And we're not here yet. So something I want to emphasize is we don't have all the answers right now. We're in data collection, and this is part of the data collection, hearing from all of you tonight through this process. So we're going to collect all this data. We're in the middle of programming. Once school gets out, we're going to get the architects and engineers going through the building, and then start to develop options from there. So we don't have any preconceived notions as to where this is going. But once we get to this stage, essentially, here's what both parties are doing. We're going to develop draft options. MSAD 6 collectively is going to brainstorm options with us. Once we come forward with those options and estimates, we're going to get feedback on those. We'll provide financial modeling of the options and life cycle cost analysis. This is just an example. I'm going to show you two examples. This is Scarborough's master plan back from 2017. There's another one for Yarmouth that we'll show as well. But essentially, looking at various options, this actually went all the way, I think, to like almost J for options. So, first option is do nothing, right? If we do nothing, what happens? So being able to understand doing nothing and the pros and cons and implications of that. And then getting into different creative solutions as to how do we best use our resources now and into the future. And that may mean, grade configurations may change slightly, or all sorts of things can be on the table. This is essentially an end result that we're seeing the options. This was a final option that came forth for Yarmouth, and we just finished constructing this recently. But they ended up modifying 4 schools, various levels of modification. One school, Yarmouth Elementary, had, you can see the green is renovation, the blue is addition. That had the most work. But there was smaller projects at each of these to be able to meet the district goals that they set out for in their master plan. So that brings us to community engagement. We get to talk with all of you and everybody else that hopefully you'll bring to the next community engagement event. So we have the overview and the visioning we're talking about today. We have another event on June 14th. This is where we get into a dialogue about what if. What if we do X? What if we do Y? And really start to hear from the community about how that may work or not and what we need to consider. And then we're trying to do those before the summer, because we all know that the Maine summer is beautiful, and even tonight it's hard to get people to come inside. We lose everybody in the summer, so that's when we do all of our work in the school, and we'll come back in late September, give it about a few weeks for the school to get up and running, pull everybody back, and that's when we'll start talking with the community about draft options. And then we'll do another one in early November with refined options, and then in December with the final report. These are just the forums. There's many different ways through thought exchange, the website that's being created, that we want to hear from the community and get you involved. and then schedule. So next opportunity is to engage, June 14th. We'll have different prompts out through Thought Exchange through the summer to continue the conversation. And then, just like we talked about the upcoming forums in the fall, what's ongoing right now, enrollment study, space utilization, educational programming. We have visioning sessions 1 and 2 complete. The facilities assessment is ongoing, as well as energy and financial analysis. And then all of that, once that's collected over the summer, will feed into evaluating options and building the master plan. So you remember that question we asked at the beginning? Everyone's probably forgotten what it was at this point. This is where we want to hear from everybody. The goals we put up on the slide at the beginning are here again. We've kind of emphasized kind of the key points. And we want to know what steps do you think the district needs to take to achieve the project goals. And we would invite everyone that wants to comment to either use this microphone or come up to the microphone. I'm going to put them on the whiteboard over here as we're collecting them. But we really want to hear from you guys to make sure that we're in step with the community as we're going through this. So I'll stop there and welcome everyone to provide feedback.
As Mr. Delaney is approaching the mic, I would just add to that this is an overview. I think there are other aspects that are not building-based, like our fields and grounds. We have talked a lot about that too, performing art spaces that we're lacking. We have, the weight room was mentioned. We have a great athletic programs, and we have a weight room that's a closet, right, that's inappropriate for use. I mean, it's just crazy. We have theater programs that win competitions across the state, and we have inadequate facilities when you go to other schools. We were performing under a tent during COVID, and it was actually really nice, and I think it sort of begged the question, why couldn't we have an outdoor performing arts facility that can be available that's more permanent, right? So those are other aspects that didn't really come up here, but they are being discussed, they're on the table, and they're part of the whole picture. So, Mr. Delaney.
Hi, I'm Todd Delaney. I live in Stanford. My daughter's going to be graduating. There we go. Sorry. I'm Todd Delaney. As Mr. Gleason said, I serve on the Budget Advisory Committee with Charity and several other people who are here. My daughter is not graduating until next year. I get to say these magical words. Align the state funding sources would be great, but Mr. Brockman and I are the math budget guys. In 2010-2011 sales cycle, the state funding cycle, Bonnie Eagle had 2 schools on the list of 70. I know this because I was on the school board. Number 32 was the high school, and number 34 was Hollis Elementary School. And the last one, we had no schools. So I love the fact of aligning with state funding sources, but my goal in this process would be the fact of looking at it not, I don't want to scare anybody, but if Mr. Brockman and I do this math kind of in our heads, is an $80 million bond is a $5 million annual. I'm the budget advisory guy, so I know this stuff in my head. For us, whether we can break this project apart into sections, and by the way, you guys did mention Kennybunk High School, the addition and renovation. I got a chance to tour that recently. It's really, you guys did a great job there. My thing is to look at the projects not only in a concept of, can we break them apart? Can we find ways to fund them through, because it looks like, and I'm just, unfortunately the math guy when it comes to state funding, I don't know if we'll ever show up on the list high enough to be funded by the state. So we're going to have to look at the funding this ourselves. So either breaking the bond into subsections like we did when we renovated the high school, or look at other options to try to see if we can get not only the projects broken into a subsection where we can fund them, but also at the same time to do the most that we can. But so that's the other thing is, I love aligning with state funding sources, and I'm not going to look at Don Moran, who's a former legislator, or Nathan Carlo, who's a legislator, and say they can make magic. I just don't think it's going to happen.
Like capture the essence of the stuff.
Yeah.
For those that can't read my writing,
So a few things you've already captured, flexibility, technology. But in terms of how do we achieve the project goals, with the future trends, to Todd's point, we don't have a lot of funding to be able to do a lot of stuff a lot of the time. So it'd be great if we could kind of get a bead on what the future trends are. And I don't know if that means going out to universities. I'm sure you guys, just in your capacity, have your pulse, your finger on the pulse to see what's coming down the line. This is great for us to think about what the current trends are with education, but what about in 10 years from now? What about 20 years from now? Since we're probably still going to be in these same buildings. So really being innovative and thinking about what's coming down the line. And then the other one I have is when thinking about success, and again, this kind of goes back to what Todd was saying, to get support, if we end up having, if the state's not just going to write us a blank check. I think it's important for the community to understand what the educational goals are that we're hoping to achieve, right? So we talked about STEM, we talked about project-based learning, making sure that the community understands that that's the ultimate goal. It's not just about getting a shiny new building. It's about meeting these particular goals and then being able to tie it back to what the potential options are so that people can really see that when we make this change to the high school or we make this change to Hollis, what does that mean for education? What do we anticipate is going to happen? I think that's really going to help people understand and buy in.
So I'm just going to take that. Perfect. So those candidates that just put community educational goals with the community and how those present. Okay. So we have so far as break bond in the subsections, future trends in education, so looking past the next 10 years, communicate educational goals with community and how living supports those goals.
Hi, my name's Nikki. I'm a Hollis Elementary School parent, and I actually also wanted to talk about just educating the community to let them know what's in it for us, what's in it for our kids. But furthermore, what I hope that we prioritize as a parent, because all of this is so amazing and we all want a great education for our kids, but none of that matters if our kids aren't safe. And so, Mr. Gleason, you had said, if we don't do anything, we'll pay for it later. And that's how, as a parent, I've been feeling with my child's safety. And in looking at how premeditated attacks on schools are and how geared towards elementary schools they have been as of late, I do feel as a parent that most community members would agree that as adults, we are their advocates and it is our duty to protect them. And so leading with that and prioritizing safety, I think would not only resonate with our community, but make teachers feel safer, make the kids feel safer, and just present that as a lead as well.
Thank you.
One of the other things that, again, it didn't necessarily come up, but it's in all of a thread in all of our conversations, is that we have a lot of community use of all our facilities. I'm looking at, Jen, the standing director in the back, and we want to continue that. And when we design these spaces, to make sure that we're actually doing intentional, making it easier to have the community use it, for groups to use it, and we can lock off the parts that we don't want them to use. It's kind of fits in that security vein, but it also is just logistically makes it easier. I think of Hollis, it's an outdated way to look at it, but they have a separate gym. It kind of stinks most of the time, but when rec wants to use it, it's great because we don't have to worry about people accessing the rest of the school, right? I think to an extent, Buxton was designed this way, maybe not quite as much as it might be, today, but that is on our minds also, is making sure community still has use, and it all makes sense.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I am a parent, a movie student, and we just got the email about Steep Falls, and I actually live on Boundary. I specifically wanted my daughter to go to MSAD because it was such a small school. I was worried about her education because I'm from California. I'm not used to the way the district was running things. And then when they said that they were going to move her possibly to Sioux Falls, I was like, wait a minute, you know. So I mean, I understand that there's a space issue, but it's such a small school, and to have a K through 4 in such a tiny school, I don't see how that could work. I could see more of like doing like a pre-K, K in that school, and then maybe end of Libby being like 1st through 3rd and then 4th through 5th already, you know? But having that much in such a small school, I just don't know how we can make it feasible for the kids. I just worry about that. And then the one other thing I was going to make a comment about, I love the open space idea when you guys were talking about, so something we do in California, because we do have open schools, we don't have closed schools. Yeah, we do have campuses. So, and I know that's hard to do here in the winter, but being able to do something in the hallways where the kids don't have to stay just in the cafeteria, but being able to explore the hallways when they're during lunch. And I know it's hard for cleanliness reasons, but it really did help stress-wise when I was in high school and junior high, being able to go off into your groups and feel comfortable with where you're at. And I know that we may not financially be able to afford some of these things, but I'm wondering if there's a way we can integrate that in the schools we already have in a way. You know, maybe you could do like a rotation schedule or something like that.
So, I lived in California and practiced there for a while, so I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a different mentality. So this would be a separate building from the cafeteria, from the classrooms, things like that. And it's the in-between spaces, right?
Right.
And so when we're talking about varied learning spaces, that's what we're trying to create. Is those in-between spaces, because that's where kids socialize.
Right.
That's where kids learn from their peers. That's where kids can present to a small group. And it's those comfortable in-between spaces. So would it be fair to kind of capture what you're saying to prioritize varied learning spaces or varied spaces or the in-between spaces?
Just having in-between spaces. Yeah, for studying and in-between time,
Yeah.
for socializing. It's nice to have that, I think, as a I want to say young adult in high school.
Yeah.
You know, so that you can develop those social skills.
Exactly.
And develop those relationships.
Yep.
I think it's good fun.
Okay, perfect.
I'll just give you a quick, my briefest answer about Steve Falls tonight, and I'm happy to talk with you after at some point. So my kids went to Steve Falls. I lived in Standish for a long time, and I have a pretty intimate knowledge of that situation. And for several years, the prevailing thought was close the school, it's small, right? But as we enter into this process, what I realized is that it could be potentially short-sighted on the part of the district if we're trying to put together a comprehensive application for potentially consolidation to already solve some of our problems that we really should be articulating in an application would be actually working against us, right? So if we solve the Steve Falls problem, I'll say in my air quotes, that would be one less thing we're solving on our application, which would make our application look less attractive, right, or beneficial, right? So some of it is strategic, hoping that we'll actually be able to get a better chance of getting funding. The other piece about the school operation is that you've seen the emails that we have to routinely cancel bus routes. You look at the size of our district, our buses are driving 1 million miles a year when you add it all up. Having lived in Steve Falls and having my kids transported to Georgia Jack, there's an inefficiency of bringing kids around the district like that. And in the short term, part of the strategy of keeping Steve Falls open and keeping kids there is as simple as transportation and keeping kids closer to home until we have a better solution. It's not a forever solution, but for now, I felt like it's the best solution to kind of save on transportation. And kids that go to Steve Falls do get a good experience. I think any parents that have kids there would tell you that they have excellent teachers. They don't have some of the same access to all the services that the kids at Buxton do, but I would say that's true of all of our elementary schools that are in Buxton. There's an inequity to all those elementary schools, and Steve Falls and Edna Libby have their own challenges themselves.
So the only other thing I would worry about is, so I know this because my daughter, but to transition them, like she's going into 3rd grade, and so she's already been with those kids since kindergarten. And take her out of that school away from her best friend. And some of those kids, they've all bonded since kindergarten. In their last year of them living, I feel like it would be a little traumatizing for some of the kids. I just worry about that. And maybe doing this in a transition to where some of those kids, it won't be so traumatizing. I just worry about that too.
Right, and I understand your point. And I think another aspect of this is currently, because again, my kids went to Steve Falls, went to Georgia. The standard students have an extra transition that other towns, Buxton, Hollis, Leamington, don't have that transition from 3rd to 4th grade. And the Steve Falls kids up until now have been the ones that have been kind of pulled away from the familiar setting and sent into this pool of kids that they're all meeting for the first time for 2 years. And that's not easy, right? So there's multiple layers to that and different ways to look at it, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about your specific situation. But that's another goal, is to reduce transitions for some of our Standish students in the long run.
We've got Kai Welcher. He's from Standish, actually. He goes to Edna Libby, so he's one of these students that may or may not go to Steve Falls in the coming years. But what did you have to say, buddy?
I wish that there was walls on my library.
Walls in his library.
Thank you for the comment. For those of you who have never visited the Edna Libby School, you might just contact Mr. Barcani, the principal, and we set up a tour. The school was built at a time when openness was the theme, and you walk into the school, there's a hallway past the office, and then you go through the cafeteria, and there's the library, and the classrooms are around the central hub library, and there are no walls. Even the classrooms, many of them don't have walls in between them. They have curtains or bookshelves. There are a lot of interesting things about that building that have to make it hard for the teachers on a day-to-day basis, and students.
And students, yes. And as a Steve Falls graduate, I can say that there are specific challenges with that transition over to Georgie Jack or to the middle school. So that's something that the school district will be very much aware of when we do these kinds of transitions. I think that the concern that was raised most to me would be we have challenges when it comes to anytime we change our building structures, anytime we do any of the things that we're looking to do here, that entails kind of thinking about how do we run those organizations. A building's a building, but we have to then put in people that are there to keep the discipline, which has been, ongoing concern within our communities, of course. So I think that as we kind of transition to this idea of opening Steve Falls up, that we just make sure that we're very clear about what the processes are going to be for getting the people in place to make sure that it's run the way that it needs to be so that people can be successful. I'm sure we'll be able to do that. Thank you.
I wanted to be sensitive that there was a child here, so I will kind of speak alluding to the issues that our country is facing. But another thing that I did have a question about is this specific project. Would the funding for this be something that we would tap into for resource officers for schools? Because last year was the highest numbers of incidents at 46. That's a lot. And there was over 300,000 children exposed to that type of violence. So there are schools, districts in Maine, Lisbon is one of them, I believe Brunswick is another one, who have mandatory resource officers at every single school during all hours of operation. Is something like that a pool that this would be, this project and this budget and funding?
I would say not directly related to this project, but it is something that's on my mind. We haven't had this conversation at the board level yet, but I have done some preliminary checking on what our options are before I bring it back to the board for discussion. But we currently have one resource officer who's the Cumberland County Sheriff's Deputy, and he has actually been pretty amazing this year trying to be everywhere, right? In a district our size, he has special jurisdiction in Buxton, and he has been very helpful as a resource going even across the river to Hollis and to Leamington HPMary School. I have had conversations with Sheriff King in York County and actually have joined a grant. It's not it's an application or the beginnings of an application regionally. So we don't have any money designated for that, so it has not come to the board yet. It's just sort of a probe to see if it's even a possibility of having like a York County resource officer. And then I had conversations with the previous Buxton chief. They now have a new chief, and I have not opened the conversation with him. And I can see a world where we might have our three agencies might all have a resource officer if the district is willing to kind of support that from a budget aspect. So then we have more than we have now, and I think we'd be pretty well covered. We wouldn't have somebody in every school all the time, but we'd have somebody really close all the time. And then I guess if the community thinks we want more, that's a conversation we could have, because there is a cost to that, but no one's going to put a cost on our kids' safety, or a limit on that.
No, I appreciate your due diligence for that, and you taking my panicking calls after incidents, so that's appreciated.
My name is Jen Bryce. I'm the director of the Parks and Recreation Department for the town of Standish. About 4 or 5 years ago, we went through this process for a community center planning phase. We got through designs, we got some options, then COVID came, and everything kind of came to a halt. But I'm glad to hear you talk more about collaboration. Clay, Adam, we've had these conversations about the inequities in Standish between the elementary schools, getting to programs. A centralized location for all of those kids would certainly help that. But also, I just want to make the point that Parks and Rec, and I think probably all the communities within the district, utilize these school buildings. I think we calculated between 14 and 1,500 hours that Parks and Rec uses the school buildings. That's more hours than kids are in school during the day. So hopefully that isn't lost in the plan phase. So just want to make that comment.
Absolutely. All the rec departments are on our minds, and Mr. Thibodeau is, I've heard him quite often do the math on how outside organizations, including the rec departments, use our buildings really more than we do in a lot of ways, depending on how you measure that. So, absolutely.
It's come up at a lot of the visioning sessions already, just how much they're used by the community. So know that's definitely an active conversation.
And just to note that Standish, particularly, as you said, with 3 sites that kids attend, it's a disadvantage or a challenge that you have that the other rec departments don't have in the same way, right? So.
Hi, my name is Kevin Cooper. I'm a Buxton resident. I have 2 sons that are in 9th and 10th grade, go to school right here at Marshall High School. I'm also a teacher here, as well as a head football coach and assistant basketball coach. And I would ask that in this process that you do not leave out our athletic facilities. I know Clay mentioned it a few minutes ago, but right now what we have here compared to the majority of schools in the state is not equal. And we use our athletic facilities for more than just sports, so this means it's more than just a handful of athletes. Look at where we are right now. We're meeting in our gym. There were practices that needed to be held today in this facility. Either this meeting couldn't be held here or the practice couldn't be held here. We had no other place inside for the practice. And so right now, the fact that we only have one gym and one facility to do both things impacts our athletes. Clay mentioned our weight room. If anybody wants to see what it's like, take a left when you leave the gym. It's right down at the end of the hall. But just to give you an idea, imagine all of us having this meeting in the weight room, all the while we're trying to work out, and that's what you get. That's what it would have looked like if you'd been here at 3 o'clock, because there were 20 plus athletes trying to work out in our weight room, representing multiple athletic teams, both boys and girls. I'm happy to show everybody into our locker rooms. They're substandard. Even this gym, really, if you compare it to schools like Kennebunk, and Biddeford, and Sanford, Gorham, it's really not an equal facility. And then lastly, we need a turf field. It's high time to recognize the fact that this district could benefit greatly in a turf field. All right, and it would be more than just again, a handful of athletes. It would be our whole district. When we talk about our rec departments, what we just did, most of that time that our rec department uses our facilities, they're in our gyms. They're on our fields. This upgrading our athletic facilities, again, is a district-wide thing that can help multiple athletes at multiple grade levels. And so I just hope that we don't forget these important aspects as we go through this process. Thanks.
Yes, that's a great point. And even the turf field conversation, you know, the athletic director, Eric Curtis, has been very vocal about pointing out that we could even host regional events and there could be a little bit of revenue that could be made off that. Because the wear and tear on the turf field is different than you know, grass, and we have to rest our fields and things because you know you have to treat that differently. So it's definitely part of the conversation.
So thank you. I'm Del Marion. I'm on the board of directors from Hollis. Mr. Cooper stole most of my speech, but I'm so happy that he got here before me because he knows much more about how the athletic things are working than I do. I can only tell you as a spectator and a citizen of these communities, and I attend a lot of the sporting events out of town and here in town, and most times out of town, the Bonnie Eagles spectators will outnumber the home team spectators. I mean, people are committed to athletics in the Bonnie Eagles School District. We need to, if we want to get buy-in from parents and other folks in the community, we need to include sports as a very high priority because they are the ones who bring our community together on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis, or in the wintertime, summertime, it makes no difference. If there's a sporting event, the parents are there. We need them here to help us achieve this. And so we certainly need to include upgrading our athletic facilities, and we sure as heck need to be talking about a turf field. So thank you very much.
My name is Jody Bodeker, and I am a member of the Standish community. I also have a son that attends this high school. He just started. My question is for you all, whether or not in the past in other schools that you've been able to use funds or from sponsors or other outlets besides state funding, and I don't know, have you seen that happen? I'm just curious. Has that happened? That's my first question, and then I have another question after that. Sorry.
So I'll just talk about projects in general, and a lot of times what we see is whether it's state funded or locally funded, there's a fundraising component, and communities get together and they put together a plan to do just that and identify what the fundraising is for and how that offsets whether it's local costs or state costs.
I'd be interested in seeing if you have data actually of how that happened or you saw how they did this.
It's a lot of work.
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
But isn't it worth it? I mean, it is worth it.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So it depends. A lot of times they partner with people that specify in fundraising to put together a plan and strategy. Unless you have members in the community that do that,
Right.
and tapping into those resources. And it's a lot of reaching out to people they know, businesses they know, sitting down for coffee, having a conversation, coming up with, once we come up with a project or projects, what are those items that they can sponsor? Are you selling naming rights to the gym? Or are you, whatever it is, and identifying those and a desired price tag for those.
That's excellent. I think that we should be looking at every single avenue to do our best for our students. Did you?
I was just going to add that as this process plays out, one of the things I think we talked about is there might be sort of subcommittees that emerge once we have direction. And I think one of the things that I've heard over the years is this sort of misunderstanding that we're prohibited from having sponsorship.
Right.
I think if we really dive into that, I'm not sure that it's exactly what people think it is. I think there might be opportunities to do that if the district chose to do that. And I think it's something worth looking into for sure. And it will definitely be part of the conversation of this project.
Great. Yeah, I mean, as through history, if you look at history, often, people in various ways privately fund more than our government, really, in the end. So I think we should give our community the opportunity to do that. Also, my second thing is that I absolutely believe that we do need athletic fields, but I just want to see it up on the board, the arts, the auditorium in here I don't know, it could be better.
It's substandard.
Yes, I don't want to be mean, but it's not great. That I think that for outdoor spaces, now see, for me, I am security minded because I'm retired in the Army, 33, so I think of that. And when I think of open spaces inside of buildings, those are harder to protect, harder to field, and there would need to be a plan in place for kids to go and almost, unfortunately, a drill of some sort, one. I'm down with the open spaces, though. I think that's great. I'm a little less down with the outside spaces. I love the outdoors. Oh, I love the outdoors. But also our weather is quite bad most of the year, and it would be a lot of cleaning up, a lot of shoveling and removal, and they wouldn't be able to use it. And I don't know if our funding, but the one thing is that outdoor theater, I do like that idea. That's cool. That's a way that the community can use it on the outside, not just members of the school. And also, I was wondering if you have a plan for, like you were saying, the gym is separated from the building and it's convenient for community use. So I was wondering if there was any way to actually think about other entry points for community while shielding the students from adults. I don't know if that is something we can also look at. That's it. Thank you.
It's a great point. And I think if you think of our middle school, I think there was an attempt made in the design of that to do something like that, and it just, people weren't thinking of the same way about security. But there is that, when you come to a play or an event in that Lowlands gym, there's a back entrance, people can come in, you can't kind of secure the rest of the school a little bit. But if we did something like that's more intentional, and I think those are all things that these folks are, familiar with and thinking about.
Hi, my name is Dan Napolitano. I am a Hollis resident, parent of 2 children that went through the Bonnie District. I actually went through the whole system as a child. Steve Falls Elementary was my elementary school. I hate to say that I'm 50 and it hasn't changed much, so I'm all with you on that. And to Libby, the same thing. I know in the very beginning, one of your first slides, you talked about BE Pride. As a matter of fact, below that slide, one of the pictures was from one of the football games. And as Coach Cooper, Don Moran, and the lady just before me, just to reiterate everything that they said in regards to the outdoor facilities, and I know we weren't going to just brush them under the rug and play touch base on them as well, but if, as Don said too, if you talk about the community, and I'm not saying anything about the arts or anything else, just because I went to almost all the athletic events. If you look at how we travel, and my son played baseball, basketball, football, we outnumbered everybody on both sides. So if you start looking at that, you really got to look at the facility in regards to, just winter maintenance facilities. I don't want to say, I say as a compliment to facilities manager, we're middle of the road, it seems like, on, getting maybe state funding, because we're not the worst and we're not the best. And it seems like we're always doing maintenance enough that we'll never be one or the other. We're always going to be in the middle. So we'll never get that, in my opinion, that state funding, because, I remember MSAD where they couldn't even hold the track event on their track. They had to go somewhere else to hold the home track event. Our track is bad, but it's not as bad as MSAD. You start looking at, football fields and stuff like that in the rain, and, on the grass, and you have to maneuver different events and sporting events because you can't play on the grass as much as you could with turf. So all that stuff comes into play, and everybody else just kind of stole my thunder. The last 3 people in front that was in line, I wasn't able back to sit down without coming up and telling everybody my name and to you folks. Thank you.
Good evening, Karina Carlson, 5th grade instrumental instructor in the district, 20 years. I would like to make a partnership with our athletic people, because every time we have a concert, we're told, don't scratch the floors, cover the floors, and then we say, cover the whole floors, and we get half the floors covered, and then we get yelled at for scratching them. I personally have been in every elementary building teaching music. Only one building has a band room that's appropriate, or a music room that's appropriate. At HBM, Art and Music Share, there is not enough space for movement, which is integral to music education. We need spaces that are big enough. I teach in a couple of spaces that are shared spaces. I have spaces that are on a stage with storage. So I want to make that partnership because I know the middle and high school really need the facilities. But I also want to make sure that we're not focusing on one aspect and excluding the other. We have kids in this district that need both. They really do. They need the athletics, but they also need the arts, very much so. And when we look at SEL and we talk about therapies, where do we go? We go music and art for those kids. And if we can provide that at a quality level in our district, we'll be doing all of our kids a great service. Thank you.
I was an arts person, not a sports person. I know sports people, that's great. Another thing I want to highlight, talking about the things that all the kids need, we have an incredible learning center that's for kids that maybe don't fit the traditional mold, and the work they do is phenomenal. And I know we're always doing our best to bring more people and to be able to expand it. And so as we're thinking about, you know, kids that don't necessarily, like, the sports don't work for them, the arts don't work for them, STEM doesn't work for them, they just don't want to be here, but we really want to give them everything they need. It goes back to that preparing them for the real world, and everybody has that potential to be great, and you just have to meet them. And so, again, it kind of goes into all the, you know, the flexibility in the modern learning, just really making sure that our facilities can meet those kids too, because their education is just as important, and let's make sure that they have the project-based learning that really gets them engaged with education and they can be productive.
I just, Florida Napolitano, Paul's resident, assistant superintendent, and I've been sitting in all of these sessions, and I said I wasn't going to talk tonight, but since there's not a lot of people here, I just want to go back to the arts and the VE Pride piece too, because I think, and I know that when we come up with options, we'll have option 1, do nothing, all the way, like you said, option J. This is probably an option J, but I think we need to consider a performing arts center, whether it's an outdoor facility, an indoor facility, a hybrid facility, because it also can be a source of revenue for the district. When you look at some of these new buildings, like Westbrook Middle or Noble, some of these newer high schools that have big performing arts centers, that is a revenue source, because then when it's not being used by the schools or the community groups, it's being rented out for, you know, all kinds of various concerts and dance competitions and activities, and that can be a good source of revenue. So I think that's important too.
I would just add that it's important to me that we are not pitting one group against another, and I feel strongly about that. Like, we need to look at what is going to meet as many needs as we can meet and be together on that, because that only benefits our students. And that's why we're trying to do this holistically, right? Like, I think I've heard, you know, there's some people who want to, you know, whether it's an arts center or whether it's a turf field or it's a new building, they have their thing that they want, but I think the more we can look at that as a whole package and do what we can to try to do as much as we can, I think that's really what our goal here is, because we can't do multiple bonds, right? If we have to put out a bond and ask taxpayers to support it, we want it to be one bond and get it right. And there is a cost, even if we get state funding, and man, I'm going to dream. I'm going to go to bed every night dreaming that we have a chance, but if the community does support a bond, right? It's a big pill to swallow, right? But if we can cover enough needs with it and meet enough needs, I think there are people in the community who would support it. If safety and security and turf fields and performing arts centers are addressed, I think there's a lot of folks out there who would say it's worth it for our kids.
So, listening to everybody, let's say we don't get the funding right away, because I'm in a dream with you. It'd be nice to get it, at least by the time Brent gets to high school. Just joking. I see there's certain things that need things like right now, like the gym. I've seen that little gym. It's horrible. I'm sorry. I feel bad for the kids. And you guys are doing an amazing job, and I know you're doing everything you can. I'm just saying that, like my fellow veteran said, it's, we do fundraisers all the time in the military, and maybe doing a fundraiser to help at least those things that are urgently needing attention. I don't have a problem with helping with something like that, and I'm sure she wouldn't either. But I'm just saying things like that, the small things that maybe we can make an improvement in, because it might even be a bit of a safety issue when you think about it. So, I don't know, what do you think? I'm just throwing it out there.
I'd like to take this pause in the action to thank Dottie Janata and Aaron Miller for our light refreshments. Make sure to fill your pockets on the way out, but don't forget to empty your pockets before you get in your car, or they'll melt in your pocket. But take some cookies for the road when we do wrap up. But thank you. Anyone else?
I'm really impressed by the amount of feedback we got tonight. I commend each and every one of you that came up to the mic to share your thoughts. I'm running out of room on the whiteboard. But this is really, really helpful as we go through this process to understand from all of you what's important, what you need to see through this process. So thank you. We will document all of this and make sure that it's shared as we get things up on websites and stuff like that. But we encourage everybody to come out to the next forum. Every forum is going to be different. Get engaged. We will have different subcommittees that can form through this process. So fundraising is a very typical subcommittee. There's others that if there are unique interests in different areas, we can look at if there are people in the community that want to be involved in that. But definitely come out on the 14th, and I really just want to thank you. And bring your friends. We like to say bring 5 friends, because usually 2 will show up. So invite 5 friends, bring them with you, maybe carpool, and let's see if we can fill up the auditorium next time. Thank you.
I think just one thing, how many people have done the thought exchange, have seen it, participated in it? Anyone? Okay, only seen a few hands. We'll keep resending that, we'll share it. You can just go in and look around. It's the online survey tool. You probably did. I bet you did. I bet you did. I know you did. I know, Laura, you're right. Where were you today, Laura, helping me with that? Come on. So we'll reshare it. We'll keep it open. Participate. There's already over 150 people that have participated. We'd love to have more. So thank you for coming tonight. I'm happy to. We're wrapping up, right? I'm happy to stick around a little bit if anyone wants to talk. But thank you for coming. Have a great evening. Take some cookies.